G'day. In this video, we'll preview the Scourge of Ghyran rules for the Sylvaneth. Now, Scourge of Ghyran offers each faction a set of seasonal rules that will be match play legal for the upcoming season, General's Handbook 25-26. Now, your Wildwoods have produced some outstanding fruit for the Sylvaneth, and it includes 2 new battle formations, 3 new artifacts, as well as 2 alternative Warscrolls, one being Drycha, the other one being the Revenant Seekers. Now, these units are match play legal. They will have a separate pitch battle profile that can be substituted for the original Warscroll. You can't include both a Scourge of Ghyran variant of the Seekers, for example, as well as the original Warscroll in the same army list. You can use them, though, in an Army of Renown, just not necessarily in a Regiment of Renown. So let's get straight into the forest and see exactly what you have gained. Starting off with our battle formations, and you have gained 2 new battle formations to go along with your existing 4 options, like Outcast, like Forest Folk, like Free Spirit. Wargrove of the Burgeoning provides a once per turn end of any turn ability. It lets you pick a friendly non-hero Sylvaneth unit within 3 inches of a terrain feature to be the target. If the target has a health characteristic of 1, you get to return up to 3 slain models to the target. Now, if the target has a health characteristic of 2 or more, roll a dice, then pick one of the following effects. Either heal X to the target, and where X is, it is equal to the roll, or you can return a number of slain models to the target with a combined health characteristic that is equal or less than the roll. The ability will be triggered on any terrain on the battlefield, not just your Wildwoods. The first effect will come in and really only impact your Dryads, and you will gain 3 slain models back should you pick your Dryads. For all other units, you'll need to roll a d6 and either heal that many wounds or return that many wounds worth of slain models to the unit. Unlike Rally, it is not going to care if that unit is in combat, nor does it care and force you to heal a damaged model first. So if you roll a high enough dice roll, you could choose either to heal or return a slain model, really depending on what you would prefer. Now, the cap is 6, so you could heal and return a slain Kurnoth Hunter. And while you can't return a Tree Lord, a potential 6 health heal is significant in your abilities to project power on the battlefield, and adding that recursion to your army and accessing even more healing in an army that is orientated around healing is only going to make your units like your Kurnoth Hunters, your Tree Lords, your Revenants, way more tougher. And even if you're not picking those types of units, you still are going to get a lot of opportunity from things like your Dryads, even looking at your 2 wounds like your Tree Revs and things like that. It is going to make it really hard and problematic for your opponent to destroy, ultimately keeping you around, scoring your battle tactics, challenging for your objectives just that little bit longer. The other battle formation is the Wargrove of Everdusk, and that provides a passive effect where friendly Sylvaneth heroes can use the Walk the Hidden Paths ability, even if it's been used by another friendly unit in the same phase. If I'm reading this rule correctly, it's going to allow all of your Sylvaneth heroes in your army to utilize the Walk the Hidden Paths ability in the same turn. As you look at the wording, it does say that you can use it even if another unit has already used the ability in that phase. Now, the order of operation is going to be important when triggering this ability, because you want to make sure that when you use your official Walk the Hidden Paths ability, you pick that non-hero unit first, and then this battle formation ability would trigger and then allow you to bring in your heroes to do the same thing. But if you were to choose a hero first, you may then cut yourself off for those non-hero units to then go on and walk the hidden paths. What this all means is it will allow your Arch Revenants to follow the Kurnoth Hunters through the Wildwoods and guarantee that synergistic buff that it can offer. It could be positioning your Warsong Revenant to be more aggressive with that ward reduction aura. You could send the Dryad Entourage go on and protect it first, and I guess get that one step earlier, get in front of the Dryads first, then bring in the Warsong Revenant. I'm sure there's a lot of combinations you could bring up, that this battle formation is ultimately going to help Sylvaneth players with incredible flexibility to reposition all of the heroes available to them, potentially simultaneously, ultimately making it easier to spread them out, combine those forces in the same area, and do what you really want to do. Sylvaneth have also gained 3 new artifacts to go along with the existing 3 options. Glamour Weave will provide a passive effect on the bearer, where each phase you can reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll, and 1 save roll for this unit. So the bearer can use up to 3 separate rerolls in every phase that allows you to do a hit, a wound, or a save. This is going to apply on all forms of attacking, which means that the hero that can shoot and fight is going to leverage more of those to hit and those to wound bonuses in the same turn. And obviously the save as well will help you reroll a save for covering fire, for units that are going to shoot at you, and potentially even some of those other phase breaking abilities where, for example, like your Vanguard Paladins go in and charge and do some shooting on the charge. You'll be able to use that reroll to a save in that particular phase as well. As a deadly combatant up close, as well as in shooting, and being a target priority for your opponent, the Spirit of Durthu is definitely the best recipient of this artifact, as it will make up a fair amount of those rerolls. It'll take advantage of those in a number of phases, and the damage is naturally higher, but often more swingy than the other heroes available. So you're getting more of those consistent rolls on the hit, wound, and save. You'll get the most value out of a Spirit of Durthu. I'm sure there's plenty of other heroes. That's just the one that stands out for me. Acorn of the Ages is an OG artifact that is returning to Sylvaneth. It is a once per battle ability that can be used in your hero phase. If there are fewer than 3 friendly Awakened Wildwoods on the battlefield, you get to set up an Awakened Wildwood wholly within 12 inches of this unit. It has to be more than 3 inches from objectives and more than 1 inch from all enemy units and other terrain features. I do love this artifact because you can use it immediately in the first turn to start growing some trees on the table, or you could use it in the late game as a get out of jail free card. But as it does have a restriction, you can only have a maximum of 3 Awakened Wildwoods on the battlefield. So while this can be used to provide you an extra set of trees, either in your territory or, depending on the battle plan, your side of no man's land in that early game, and given that the initial Wildwoods are set up during deployment in your territory, it's probably worth waiting at least until turn 2 or turn 3 when you can be a little bit more aggressive with putting the trees down, much further up to the battlefield. But I guess the warning here is also don't wait too long, because as the game unfolds, you may find it harder to place those trees onto the battlefield with all the units around potentially blocking up the conditions we just spoke about. It's essentially, when I think about it, a guaranteed cast of Tree Song. It does have less functionality and less range when you think about the way you bring the trees onto the battlefield. And unlike Tree Song, it can't be used in the enemy turn where you'd be able to cast it with magical intervention. What it does do is it allows you to plan for a flavorful teleport much earlier on with some certain guarantees. It allows you to think about how you might strategize around walk the hidden paths to a particular point near that initial tree, or thinking about having that extra fallback point for strike and fade. It could also just be another source to trigger some of the army healing and other Sylvaneth bound abilities. And if you really want to kind of maximize those trees early, you could absolutely flood the board with both the artifact and Tree Song. The last artifact is Lemu's Lamentary, and it's a once per turn reaction where an opponent declares a spell ability for that unit within 30 inches of this unit. Now, make an unbinding roll of 2d6. If the roll exceeds the casting roll for the spell is unbound and the effects are not resolved. Then, inflict the amount of mortal damage on the caster equal to the difference between the casting roll and the unbind roll to a maximum of 6. So, unlike a standard unbind reaction, this doesn't require the user to be a friendly wizard to use the unbind ability, which is going to mean that non-wizard heroes can use this artifact, and it is a special unbind that doesn't count towards the wizard's maximum number of unbinds available to them. So it means that a wizard can use this particular artifact and still have access to up to their power levels worth of normal unbinds in the same turn. Additionally, there are no restrictions on how many different reactions can be used against the same ability. So it can be used in addition to other abilities like your standard unbind in the same spell. So consider this as a potential backup to unbind in case your opponent has more cast than you and you wouldn't normally be able to access additional unbinds here. Or it could be an extra chance to stop that critical spell that you just don't want to go off. In addition to all of that as well, you do have the damage dealing effect, which is going to scale depending on the casting roll and the unbind roll. So if you want to make the most of it, ideally you want to pick a spell that has a low casting value where the opponent has rolled, let's say, for example, a 5, and it was only just successful. Now it's based on the roll, not on the casting value, so just look for the dice rolls. While any hero can benefit from this artifact, I do think it's a nice way to spread out those unbinds across your army, or it could also be used to gain some extra magical protection, especially if you're not taking any wizards. Someone who I think could benefit from this particular artifact would be the Warsong Revenant, given that it's got some unbinding bonuses that would then, I guess, very unique unbinding reaction for this artifact in combination. You have gained 2 alternative war scrolls with the Scourge of Ghyran. The first one that we'll look at is Drycha, and it is completely optional. If you prefer the existing Drycha, it is absolutely up to you. You pick what works for you. I will compare the two for you to help you make a better decision. And I'll start off with the Scourge of Ghyran. When you look at the base profile, she has gained an extra point of movement. She has gained 2 extra points of health, and that will bring her up closer to the stat line of other monsters in your army. She did lose the Swarm of Swarmlings, that melee profile, and she's also lost her shooting profile completely, the Flood of Furies. But in her place, she has gained and literally doubled her melee profile of the Slashing Talons. That profile has gone from 5 attacks up to 10 attacks. And she's also become Rend 2 rather than having the Rend 1 plus anti-infantry. But the abilities haven't all been lost, because even though she's traded in anti-infantry, she has gained crit 2 hits, which I think, I know, is much more impactful on the 10 attacks than the Rend 1 with anti-infantry. I'd much rather crit 2 hits and an extra 5 attacks. I mean, mathematically, you should get almost 2 extra attacks. So you really at almost like attacks 12, which is crazy. She's no longer a moody teenager after losing the mercurial aspect. Her rampage has changed, and so is her spell on her Warscroll. When I look at the overall changes, and we'll talk about the abilities in a second, but when I look at the profile change, she reminds me a lot of Sigvold, that kind of hero. She's not exactly Sigvold, but she has this really interesting, unique place in the army where she can negate wards for the attacks via her new ability called Strength from Spite. Her Rend 2 attacks and a bucket load of dice and the ability to ignore wards can be an absolute game changer when you go into those tougher, ward-reliant type targets. This can also reduce the need of having a Warsong Revenant in your army to cut through things like Nurgle or Death, although she's not a complete swap for swap between the Warsong and Drycha, but she is bringing that anti-ward type abilities to the faction. She has gained a couple of new abilities, well, one spell and one rampage. The spell is Twisted Spirit Song. It is Drycha's new Warscroll spell. It's cast on a 6 and targets a friendly Sylvaneth unit that is wholly within 12 inches of her. And until the start of your next turn, you get to add 1 to the wound rolls for the target's combat attacks, including those made with companion weapons. In addition, if the target is a non-Kurnothi, add 1 to the attack characteristic of the melee weapons as well. So looking at the first part of the spell, the +1 to wound rolls can buff any friendly Sylvaneth units, and it's worth reinforcing that it does also affect your companion weapons. So it's going to work wonders with your Kurnoth Hunters as much as your Spite Lancers. If you want to make the most of this spell, you are targeting a non-Kurnothi unit like your Spirit of Durthu, your Spite Lancers, or your Revenant Seekers. I mean, you could use it on any model, I guess, outside of being a Kurnothi. You could even use it on your Dryads if you wanted to roll a bucket of dice, although it's not really a viable strategy. I guess it could if you really needed it, but I wouldn't be building a Dryad army. Your Tree Lords as well, all the variants of your Tree Lords would also benefit greatly from the +1 attack, given that they have a number of melee profiles, and that +1 to wound bonus it'll have a lot of value, especially when there is a source of -1 to wound around in your army. The other new ability is the Vicious Spite Swarms. It is her Rampage ability, and it's a reaction for when an opponent declares a charge ability within 18 inches of this unit. Your opponent must pick either to subtract D3 from the charge roll, and in addition, if your opponent re-rolls that charge roll, you'll subtract D3 from that roll as well, or subtract 1 from hit rolls for that unit's attacks for the rest of the turn, and add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks that target that unit for the rest of the turn. So this is going to work on a standard charge, counter charge, or any unique faction charge abilities that have the charge keyword. Because it's a reaction, you'll get to see the opponent's charge roll before declaring to use a reaction if you want to save it for maybe another unit that maybe has a longer bomb charge as opposed to, basically they're 3 inches away and you basically guarantee it. A D3 is not going to do a lot there. You will subtract D3 from the charge rolls, not only on the initial roll, but also on the re-roll charge roll. So should the opponent have a re-roll and they want to re-roll it, they can't get around it, you've still got that failure point. They can't get away from it. It's delicious. Or if they're rolling a counter charge, you can't re-roll a counter charge anyway, which is actually horrifying depending on where you are on the battlefield. This can be demoralizing for an opponent who has no command points or has used it on a counter charge because you can't re-roll a counter charge. And it can stop things like scoring battle tactics. It could stop, objective control. There's a whole bunch of things. It could be a buff piece that really needed to hit a charge or needed to be within a particular combat zone in order to provide a buff from one unit to another. This has a lot of really good value. I think the biggest value point here is when an opponent was able to ambush or deep strike, come onto the battlefield and just deploy or set up just outside of 9 inches, and they are within the bubble range as well. So it means they're outside of 9, just outside of 9. They need a 9-inch charge, and assuming they have no bonuses to charge, a 9-inch charge is already an uphill battle. And then forcing them with a D3 subtraction from that roll could make it a 12-inch charge, which is, basically really, really hard. Like if you look at the maths, it's I think even a 9-inch charge is something like 75% failure rate, and you've only just increased the odds. and you've also potentially made them burn a command resource to make it happen, or it may stop them from ambushing just because they know they got a failure point. Alternatively, if your opponent does roll incredibly well and you know that the D3 won't change much to the charge, you do have the other option, which is at flat -1 to hit for the charging enemy unit. That will have some negative impacts in that upcoming fight. And we know that all-out attack now carries that defensive save, issue as well. So you use all-out attack, you will be -1 to save for that upcoming combat. So they might use all-out attack just to kind of negate that -1 to hit. But now that they're even more vulnerable to your attacks in return, or they might not use all-out attack and save it for an all-out defense, and they're fighting on a -1. You kind of where I'm going with this. And should they be -1 to hit, you have now a perfect opportunity to put a +1 save using all-out defense. Something like your Kurnoth Hunters would be great to kind of hold and stand their ground. Very, very durable. Makes it very, very tough for your opponent to charge into them. This is a great overall glow up for Drycha, as she's giving your army a unique capabilities, and her rampage, her spell, her cutting through ward will absolutely be incredibly valuable, and again, worth considering. We've got a lot of great heroes in there, whether it's Belthanos or Alariel or Durthu. Well, there's so many great heroes. I think this has definitely raised the bar on Drycha and has given her a really interesting role in your army. The other alternative Warscroll is your Revenant Seekers. Comparing the original Warscroll to the Scourge of Ghyran Warscroll, the base profile is unchanged. The Rider's melee weapons have gained +1 damage, which should improve their damage, especially when you look at the crit mortals that is on the profile. It's still retained their 2-inch coherency, but it has lost the thrumming of life or with life ability, which gave them that access to heal. And they also lost their rally bonus that they had on their Warscroll. So what that does do is it makes the Warscroll a little more fragile on the battlefield. So you will need to protect them a little better and be a little bit more strategic of how you use it. But there is another ability here that might actually contradict everything I just said, but it's based on a dice roll of a 3-up. Now, it's gained this rule called Elementary Life Energies, and it's a once per turn any hero phase ability. Pick a visible friendly Sylvaneth unit wholly within 12 inches of this unit to be the target. Roll a dice, and on a 3-up, the target has ward 5-up for the rest of the turn. So this can be applied to a friendly Sylvaneth unit, and it does include themselves. So that kind of where I said I kind of contradict myself. Should you hit the 3-up, you could give the unit a 5-up ward, which does then make them not fragile, actually quite solid there. The buff will last until the end of the turn. So you'll need to, if you've got a particular unit you're trying to keep buffed up with the 5-up ward, you will need to keep them close and keep them wholly within 12 inches of this unit. Or you could just buff them up, let them be free, let them go up on the battlefield, and then go use the 5-up ward on themselves or another unit. With their high base move, they have great value, especially with the flying capabilities and accessing to things like teleport. So it should be pretty easy for you to keep your Seekers around, buffing up and giving those bonuses out to whichever unit that you want them to be buffed up. And you could also follow around certain units, or play that supporting role if they want to be a support role, or they can be buffering up themselves and being this durable hammer and anvil unit. A 5-up ward on a reinforced unit like themselves, or like Kurnoth Hunters, or put it on a tough monster hero, it could be an absolute game changer when it comes to survivability, although it isn't reliable because it is still a 3-up. So in the times that you really need it, you might roll that 1 or a 2, and it is a once per turn army ability. So you can't generate multiple 3 model Revenant Seekers and then try to generate multiple wards. it'll obviously give you a lot more options on where you trigger the 5-up ward, but you can't trigger multiple of them from this particular ability. And it's going to help them if you put them into a strike and fade and go send them off. Again, they're going to be around way longer. So overall, Sylvaneth have gained a heap of new abilities and war scrolls. The new battle formations are certainly interesting, with the option of being able to walk the hidden paths with multiple heroes probably being my favorite choice. The 3 new artifacts feel like they'll have some play, especially with some of the changes coming with all-out attack and all-out defense. I could really see the Glamour Weave becoming popular, but also even Acorn of the Ages and getting more trees, or a more reliable tree as opposed to Tree Song. Again, a lot of good options for you. The new Drycha, I think, is a significant glow up compared to the existing Drycha, and I could see her as a viable hero choice, but you are, again, spoilt for choices when it comes to heroes. So who does this drop, and why do you drop it, and what can you bring in? There's a lot of great options here. Certainly a good question to ask yourself. When it comes to your Revenant Seekers, I think they're certainly interesting. Their ability to be able to allocate that ward can give them a support piece role, or you could reinforce them and that could be a real hammer and anvil. You just got to make sure you roll the 3 up. There is a lot of great things here and a lot of things to consider as we prepare for General's Handbook 26. And if you want to theory craft and list build and talk to me about all the various ideas you've got and you're cooking in the kitchen, why not come over to the AOS Coach Discord server, where we have plenty of spaces dedicated to talk about all the factions like Sylvaneth. The link is down below in the episode description, and I hope you enjoyed the fruits from the Forest of Sylvaneth. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AOS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double 1 on a spell cast.